And just to be clear, we're talking specifically about location data related to, or that you would be able to discover related to the data that's on an actual cell phone. Based on your training and experiences, your understanding that there's other ways to determine the location of a cell phone that don't involve strictly the data on the phone?
Like such as conversations, you can see if people are talking about where they are. But
cell tower locations and those types of things?
Yeah,
as well?
You can get cell tower locations. I didn't do anything with that on this case. Someone else did, but yeah, for sure you can get what's called a geolocation search warrant, and that can then, basically your location is always pinning off of towers. And so you can get locations that way.
And as you just stated, that's outside of the scope of what you did on this particular case.
Correct.
So I do want to turn now to this case specifically. Did you receive some electronic devices associated with this case for examination?
I did.
Do you recall which devices you received?
Yeah, so I received a HP computer. I received 3 iPhones. Well, 3 iPhones that I was advised were Karina Cooper's, and then there was 6 iPhones that I was advised was Huston Danker's.
And did you examine each of these devices?
I did.
Did you follow the protocol essentially that you outlined previously in examining these devices?
I did.
So that would involve connecting them, making a copy of the data, utilizing those programs that you referenced, and then working both with the raw data and the output of those programs.
I did.
Can you outline briefly what information you had when you began your examination?
Yeah, so I was only given that there was a shooting in Tama County on the day of June 18th, 2021, around 4:30 a.m. And they just wanted to know if I could get a better extraction than what they got originally, and that's all I was told.
Okay, and with that information then generally, what type of information would you be looking for?
Yeah, so obviously with the shooting, you'd be looking for guns. You'd also, to narrow down the scope a little bit, take it down to the time of the incident, see what was happening around then, which in this case would be prior to.
And it sounds like you received phones that belonged both to Karina Cooper and Huston Danker. So you understand that there was a shooting, you understood the date that this occurred, and it sounds like there was potential involvement of 2 separate parties. So were you looking for information related to, as you said, at or around the time of that shooting you're looking for information? What types of information are you looking for, especially considering that we're talking about 2 potential individuals being involved?
Yeah, so at the time I did not know if there's their involvement. I was not told anything besides Karina's name, that she was the wife of the deceased. So what I was just looking at is if anything stood out as far as like conversations, movements, any searches prior to, pattern of life, like I mentioned before, just any sort of conversations.
Okay. And I'm not asking you to go into what you found, because we're going to go through that here in a moment. But ultimately, were you able to, when you examined these devices, find any information of evidentiary value?
I was.
On which devices did you find that information?
Yeah, so on the first iPhone 8 Plus that I was advised was Karina Cooper's. On the white iPhone 7, I was advised was Huston Danker's. And on the iPhone 10, that I was also advised was Huston Danker's.
And just generally, what types of information did you find that were of value?
Yeah, so there was Google searches, health data, Facebook, or not Facebook, but text messages, Snapchat conversations, and then pattern of life.
I want to talk to you a little bit. You talked about 2 separate phones. There's an iPhone 8 Plus that was determined to belong to Karina Cooper. I'll start with that phone. How were you able to determine, or were you able to determine by looking at the data and information on the phone that it belonged to Karina Cooper?
I was.
How were you able to do that?
Yeah, so there was a lot of usernames to different applications on there. Her email was also on there. It was also registered to her for her Apple account.
When you say it's registered to her, and I know you had referenced this previously when talking about the types of information you can find on a phone, what are you looking at that tells you who's registered the phone and essentially who owns that phone? What is that information that's on there?
Yeah, so when you have an iPhone, you typically would register it to like an iCloud account. In this case, hers was linked to an iCloud account. There's also other addresses, or email addresses that is, such as for her lasting impressions job that she had. And then there's also within the web browser different sites that she went to that you would log into, and those emails or usernames are also saved on that device.
You mentioned lasting impressions. Through the work that you did on this phone, were you able to make a determination about what that was?
It was a hairdressing company.
And the same question with regard to Huston Danker's iPhone 7. What were you able to find that made you believe that it belonged to Huston Danker?
Yeah, so similar to what I said with her, there was, on the web browser, there was usernames, emails associated that had his first and last name on there. It was also registered to an iCloud account.
So turning to these two phones, I guess I'll start with Karina's phone. You talked a little bit about the types of information that you were able to locate. Were you also able to find data or look at data that gave you some notion of her pattern of life or usage of the phone?
Yeah, so, yes.
So there's a lot of, well, I guess I want to ask you this with regard to these phones. You've talked a little bit about being able to locate or determine information about dates and times. That would include dates and times certain things were accessed or communications took place. How are you able to determine that those dates and times are accurate?
Yeah, so we always do validation. And on top of that validation, I always do more. So when I find a piece of evidence that I think is pertinent, you can actually take out that database, and then it has the date and time stamp also within that, and I use what's called this DB browser, which is just an interpretation of that string of numbers, which is the date and time, to see what it says to make sure that my software is actually interpreting that correctly too.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you to slow down just a little bit. You said the first thing you mentioned was validation, and then you said you do more than validation. Can you start by explaining what validation is?
Yeah, so there's different ways you can validate. One of that is you take a phone that you know dates and times on, what is going on, and you image that phone. Then you process it to verify, do those date and time stamps line up with what you know is on that phone.
Okay, we're learning about validation, what they go through in terms of a process with these devices. Getting closer, though, to learning exactly what was said on these devices that alarmed investigators. Let's bring in criminal defense attorney Joanna Nieves, who is with us. Joanna, love to get your thoughts on this case, especially where we are right here with the cell phone data. There used to be a phrase that the DNA doesn't lie and that you've got DNA that's slam dunk, but I think the new DNA is cell phone data. Data doesn't lie, and people really expect for the prosecution to show what the cell phones were doing when they are bringing a case.
You're absolutely right. I mean, digital evidence is everything right now, and the prosecution is taking the time to explain a lot of these terms because it can be complex to understand. We're talking about, different programs and platforms that she uses to interpret the data. Like you said, validation, pattern of life, binary code. Like, what do these things mean to the jury? But he's taking it step by step, having her slow down, explain the terms, and, the evidence that we're looking for is, that usage of the phone, the search history, those text messages are likely going to help us kind of paint the picture of what really happened. Was she a co-conspirator in this? Did she give him the green light to go ahead and actually murder her husband? So I think that, right now what we're looking for is that what we're getting is that foundation being laid for the evidence that's going to be critical.
Oh, yeah. The prosecution started their opening statement with the text message where there was this sort of vague message from her co-defendant saying that tonight's the night or things are about to start. And she said, let's go or go. And that is what they used to show that this was a conspiracy and that they acted in concert. I do want to go back because I want to get your reaction to the defense in this case. We're listening to the prosecution's case now, but we're thinking about the defense as we're going through it. Let's listen to their pretty quick opening statement from yesterday.
Huston Danker killed Ryan Cooper. Huston Danker shot Ryan Cooper in the face. Huston Danker solicited Karina. Huston Danker manipulated Karina. Huston Danker lured Karina. Huston Danker had Karina living in a dream world. Huston Danker killed Ryan Cooper. You're gonna see some Snapchats. You're gonna see some pictures. You're gonna see conversations about IVF. Dream world. IVF, she's got her tubes tied. Huston Danker killed Ryan Cooper. Karina Cooper was in a dream world, and then it became real, and then she was in too deep. She did not want her husband dead. She did not want his life insurance money. You'll see, you'll hear, the money's still there in trust for her children. Nobody rode off into the sunset to the mountains. Huston Danker killed Ryan Cooper. Please, as you hear the evidence in this case, keep an open mind. Don't rush to judgment. And at the end, we'll ask that you find her not guilty.
Joanna, what do you think about this defense? And you heard Attorney Watt there explaining that these jurors are going to see text messages, Snapchats. So do you think that explains away what we are about to hear from this digital forensics investigator?
I see where the defense is going with this and trying to argue that Huston Danker acted independently and that Karina was unaware and uninvolved. But, you know, if the text messages show what was promised to us in opening statements, that there was a reminder to remember the casings and, you know, this ominous, I'm going to get this done and she says go type text message, whether he's the one who pulled the trigger or if it was her, she's no less complicit in it if she was encouraging the behavior and plotting with him to carry it out.
Joanna, we appreciate your analysis. Stand by. We're going to get back in for more of that testimony after this quick break.